Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I know it's been a long time since I've not uploaded any videos on YouTube. Well, so actually this video is my basic analysis of English prose assignment. So I'm going to analyze a short story about Snow White. I'm sure you guys have ever heard this story because this story is so popular back then. Well, maybe until now. Well, in this video, I will explain all of my analysis of this story. Without any further ado, let's get started.
So right first I will use this application to draw the explanation of my plot. Alright, firstly I'm gonna explain the plot details. I'll be explain it this way. Well, this is what my lecturer always do in my introduction to literature class while analyzing the story. So, the story always starts with the exposition. The exposition is like the setup of the story. Of course, it is provide the background information that is needed to understand the story, such as the main character, the setting, the basic conflict, and so forth. In this story, the explanation starts when the Snow White has a new stepmother, until when Snow White meets the dwarfs and she lives with them because she is hiding from the evil queen. Well, in all of the stories, surely there is a conflict. Conflict is a problem that occur in the story. So this conflict in this story is the character versus character. Well, the conflict is completely driven by the queen's jealousy of Snow White's beauty. Well, this is start with the racing action. Racing action is a series of events and actions that move the story to a climax. During racing action, the basic conflict is complicated by secondary conflicts such as obstacles and challenges. In this story, racing action starts when the queen finds out that Snow White has not been killed by the huntsman, so the evil queen decided to go to kill Snow White by herself. Next is the climax, or you may say turning point. Well, the climax is the peak of the action and turning point in the story. After the climax, everything changes. Things will have gone badly for the main character up to this point. In Snow White's story, the climax is when the queen tried to kill Snow White. Well, the queen desperately wants the girl dead. Firstly, what the queens do is when she gave Snow White poison comb, but she failed. Next is when she gave Snow White poisoned ribbon, but she failed again. And lastly, she gave Snow White poisoned apple. Well, it works. Finally, the Snow White is dead. Alright, after the climax, there is falling action. During falling action, the conflict unravels with the main character either winning or losing. Well, it might contain a moment final suspense. Alright, the falling action in Snow White's story is when the prince meets Snow White and he take care of her. So, The last is the resolution, or you may say denouement. The story ends with the denouement, in which the main character is better off than at the beginning of the story. So, denouement is when the prince's servants stumbled when carrying Snow White, and it dislodged a poison apple from her throat. So Snow White lived again. She lived happily ever after with the prince, and the queen dies. She killed herself. So, after explaining the plot details, I'll be explain the character. There are two characters, major character and minor character. Major character is the central to story's plot or conflict. So, the major character in this story are Snow White and the Queen. They both have a static character, which they're not changing until the end. Well, the story says Snow White is innocent and lovely girl, while the queen remains evil throughout the story. So the minor character is the supporting the major character's role or help. There are three kind of characters. There are dwarfs, the huntsman, and the prince. There are three have the flat character, which means the character that are not described well in the story. So the setting in this story, well, there are a place and time. It can be included in physical context. Well, it takes place in the palace and forest, also the cottage. The times are in the morning and the evening. So let's move on to the symbol. Well, there are three colors at the beginning of the story when the queen says she wants to have a child that has a white skin and red cheeks, also the black hair. Well, three color represents different meaning. The red represent life and passion, while white represent innocence, and the black color, well, is given one of its traditional meaning, which is death. The fact that Snow White has such a black hair hints that Snow White shadowed by death, as indeed she is. And the theme, I think the right for a universal theme is the parents and child relationship. Well, it tells us the evil stepmother throughout the story. So next, move to the literary elements. Usually they say the figurative language. There are foreshadowing and the metaphor. The foreshadowing is a literary device in which a writer gives an advance hint of what is to come later in the story. Well, in the text it tells, but though she seemed dead, Snow White kept her beautiful white skin and seemed more like statue than a dead person. Well, I think it shows that actually Snow White is still alive. And the metaphor. Metaphor is a figure speech that describes an object or action in a way isn't literally true but helps explain an idea or make comparison. Well, it tells the skin as white as snow and cheeks red as blood. So the next is formulate the opinion. Well, after I read all of the texts about Snow White's story, well, I found the differences between one text to another text. Well, they present their stories in different ways. Well, I think this story is amazing, but at some point, I disagree with the author that Snow White has a white skin. Well, I think it looks so creepy for me. She kind of looked like a vampire. Next is the way the queen dies is not too epic for me. So the queen's action that very cruel to Snow White is not comparable with the action, I think. Well, so the last is that I want to make connection with the other text. So as I said before, I think there are many differences between one text to another text. For example, the Brother Grimm's text uh, with the Disney one, and the one that I've read, but it doesn't tell who is the writers, so I just make comparable of them. In Disney, the queen just asks the huntsman to kill Snow White, while in the Grimm, the queen doesn't want Snow White's heart. She wants her lungs and liver. And while in the story that I've read, the queen wants her heart. So there are differences. And the next one is the queen in Disney story. The queen is trying to drop a rock on the dwarfs to kill them, and her plan backfires and she falls off a cliff. In the Grimm story, the queen forced to wear red hot shoes and then still she dies. While the story that I've read is that the queen killed herself. And one thing that in the story that I've read, the dwarfs is only three, while in the Disney and the Grimm there are seven dwarfs in the story.
So yeah, I think that's all my video about analysis of the short story titled Snow White. Well, hope you understand well my explanation. Oh yeah, and if there are any mistakes, please comment down below. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. See you on the next video.